Hello, and welcome to Deaf Artists Backstage. My name is Joey Caverly, and I host a weekly interview in partnership with Gallaudet University Theatre and Dance Company program. The reason we have the interviews are because I wanted to connect with different deaf artists across the country, talking about their frustrations, their experiences, trials and tribulations. Today, I have an esteemed panel for you that's going to talk about the audition process. If you look at the bottom of the screen, we do have captions along with voice interpretation. The captions are an auto caption system, so there may be errors, which we apologize for in advance. During this panel discussion, if you have any questions, please feel free to put that in the Facebook chat or comment feature, and I will be using those during the interview. I'd like to take the opportunity now to introduce our panelists. Hello, everyone. We could just take a minute now, if you could introduce yourselves, tell us your name, preferred pronouns, as well as what you do for work.
Hello, everyone. My name is Monique Holt. I work as a theater director and also as a dazzle.
And what are your preferred pronouns?
She, her, and hers.
Okay, Alexandria.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alexandria Wailes. Pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am a director, dancer, choreographer, dazzle, and an advocate. I play many roles in the community.
Hello, everyone out there. My name is Andrew Morrell. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm currently in grad school getting my MFA at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Fem. My pronouns are they and them. I am a casting director for theater and television.
And I don't mean to single you out, Andrew.
No, please do.
But Andrew is hearing, and I wanted to be transparent about that, about his hearing status.
Yes, I appreciate that.
The reason why I'm hosting this panel today is I wanted to talk more about the audition process. There are lots of resources out there that talk about audition processes, but they are hearing centric. And as a deaf person going into an audition, it's a completely different process. So I wanted to bring this panel together today to talk about the different issues you've experienced or anything that a deaf person auditioning may encounter. The first question that I want to open up with is for Monique. Monique, you are one of my former professors from Gallaudet University, and I can remember auditioning for the show that you directed, You're in Town. I was new and very green to acting at the time, and I remember coming in and you were sitting behind a table, and you asked me what my audition monologue was. And I was a little confused about what monologue you were talking about, or what a monologue is. So could you talk a little bit more about why it's important to have a monologue prepared and why it's important to pick the correct one? How do you do that?
Absolutely, that's a great question. Oftentimes when we post information for open calls for auditions and the importance of being prepared. So again, it's always important to have something ready, what is asked of you specifically, plus something that you have ready that might not be aligned with that specific audition. They might send you some sides, which are part of the script that you have to memorize, and then eventually you will have to sign in your audition. The reason it is important is for the director to be able to see your talents and skill. It's first about memorization and how fast you can do that. Also, how fast you can sight translate something from English into ASL, and also to look at your style. and see how you are able to convey and express that specific character coming in and out of character. Then sometimes the director wants to see a little bit more. And when they do that, they're going to ask you to do the same monologue again, but they might ask you to implement some changes. Maybe they'll ask you to have a different adjective or a different verb, which meaning they'll ask you to be a little bit angrier for this time, be a little bit more physical for this one, be a little bit more reflective. So they want to see your range of what you can do as an actor. So maybe you are auditioning for a specific role. However, the director realizes that that role is not a great fit for you, but it might be you might be a great fit for a different role in that play or in that show. So that's the reason they want to see different emotion, different ranges. Even the monologue is specific to the role that you're auditioning for. That might still give an indication that you might be a good fit for a different role. And the director will keep you in mind as they're going through the auditions, and because they know your range and how you respond and how you take the notes that are given to you. And taking notes means that director will give you a piece of feedback and you are able to incorporate it into what they're asking of you. It's important to be a team player. Artists cannot work in silos. You have to have the ability to work in a team, and oftentimes directors don't want to have to tell the actor what to do. At the same time, you should not be an actor that should expect everything to be told to you. So it's team process that is very important. So that's another important piece of the audition process.
So if I were to prepare a monologue, typically for auditions, they're about 2 minutes worth of monologue that you need to prepare because they have to see so many people audition and they have a limited amount of time. Now, let's say I find a great monologue, however, it goes a little longer than 2 minutes or it's shorter than 2 minutes. Is that okay?
Basically, yes, it is okay as long as you have something to show. Often, to be honest, 2 minutes, it's really the first 20 seconds, the director will know whether they want you or not. I mean, if it's a Shakespeare monologue, the director has seen everything and everyone auditioning with the same monologue. So it's important for you to stand out and make yourself unique. So how can you shine in front of that director? And shining can be in many different ways. You can shine in quiet ways, and you can also shine in very loud ways. Again, they're seeing so many men and women who might be able to play that specific role. So you want to make sure that you give something that grasps that director's attention, and then they can polish it and make it that perfect fit. You might have an actor who is incredibly talented. They might be the best choice. However, they're not selected because others didn't shine as much. So maybe they consider this person for a future role. So how people are shining and standing out is very important. And sometimes someone is not selected because they shine too much as compared to the other actors that have auditioned, and that will be too much of a standout. So it is important to have that balance in an ensemble.
So this next question is for Andrew. You work as a casting director in New York City. Could you talk a little bit about what the role of a casting director is? What is it that they do?
So I think one of the big misconceptions about my role is that I'm the one who selects people, that I'm the sole person who selects the cast. I'm the sole decision maker. That's a big misconception, that I have the final say myself. And know that that is not the case. So I want everyone to know that that is not the case. So my role really is to work with all the individuals and everyone in the creative team, the director, the writers, whoever is part of that creative team, to try to work together to make a decision for an actor for a specific role. So again, it's teamwork. So part of my job is knowing the actors, organizing the casting process, and then and working with the creative team and making sure that everyone is on the same page. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. So you work with many people, the directors, the creative team, those involved in the creative process. So when you're auditioning actors, what are you looking for in those actors? Could you give us some examples?
Well, like Monique just said, wanting to see whether someone stands out. So it is important to come prepare and rehearse, absolutely. But like Monique said, sometimes the most prepared actor is not going to be the one who's cast. Maybe an actor who might not have as much training in the field might actually get the role rather than the veteran one. And the one that came incredibly prepared because they stood out more than the other one. I think it's important for you to know that it's not personal. It's just about the needs of the show, the director's vision, the writer's vision. So just like Monique said, the goal is to come up with an ensemble, not just cast individuals, because an ensemble has to be able to work well together.
I'd love to add on to what Andrew just mentioned. Going to auditions and hearing the word no should never be taken personally. Yes should always be taken personally when you are accepted for a role. You shouldn't question your ability as an actor or an actress when coming in and being told no or not cast for a role. People who are in the creative team are looking for specific people for specific roles. So you should never take those casting no's personally.
Andrew, you said you're in graduate school at the University of Illinois in, I can't spell that the name of that town. Can you say that again?
Champaign is
All
what
right.
it sounds like.
So if you go to an audition room, what do you bring with you as you're preparing and coming into the audition room?
For university auditions or generally?
Just in general auditions.
And it's really going to depend on the type of audition for me. If it's going to be a stage performance, it'll depend. There'll be an opening scene, and for that, they'll do an open call for actors. And that process has two different components to it. You can have the dramatized version or a comedy. You need to be able to bring both. And it should be a reflection of who you are as an actor, not potentially the character, but it should be a reflection of who you are as an actor. Maybe that role is something that you like a lot. I would suggest that you pick any piece that you feel like really resonates with who you are as an artist, because other people in the room are going to see that you really connect to that role and want to know more about what it is that you can do. You want people in the room to know what your audition skills are, and that it's not just about those skills. It's also about what you bring to the table network-wise and being amongst other individuals and other professionals.
And Joey, to you, others can answer if you like as well. Once you graduate, where do you go about finding auditions? Where do you go?
Absolutely. Well, you've got to do your research. As an actor, 80% of the work that you're going to be doing is looking for roles. 20% will be actually performing. So you do a lot of research related to what theater companies that you like, be it New York City or whatever region it's in. Look up those theater companies, see if they do open calls, reach out to the casting department, send your headshot as well as your resume. You never know. They may like what they see and invite you over for an audition. I use the IMDb Pro online, and that helps you also find more information about TV and film roles, what casting opportunities are coming up. Directors will often post there, and you can look and see what kind of different casting opportunities are there. You can send your resume and your headshot through IMDb Pro. A lot of it's about networking and connecting, and that's not an overnight task. That's a long-term goal. I've got to be able to make people remember me for several years at a time, and developing those types of relationships are really important. So after graduation, yes, it is going to take some time, but that's my plan.
If I may add to what Andrew was saying, I think you need to look at actorsaccess.com. There is backstage.com as well, several websites where you can look up potential auditions in your area, different characters, and you can actually put in your information, and later you might be actually be able to find out roles that fit best with what you have to offer. For example, I say that I'm a mixed race woman with that dark hair, I'm 5'8". The age ranges that I can play, and I put all that in my profile, and then I can see potential roles that would work for me in my area. If it's something too far, of course, that would not be applicable to me. Oftentimes, people have the misconception that if you have a rep or a manager, you are guaranteed auditions, and that is not the case. 80% of acting is actually being assertive, going out there, networking, looking for the jobs for you, finding ways, being creative on how to get noticed, and communicating with your rep or your agent if you happen to have that, checking in with them, maintaining that relationship and that communication, because they are busy as well. So you do have to do a lot of work yourself.
Yes, and you have to remember, when I graduated from college, I decided to get with some friends and do a showcase. There were old cards that you would send out to different agencies, and then you would invite them to come watch your showcase. And that's how I originally started getting work. It's almost a self-audition of sorts, which is how it used to be done. You always want to keep in touch with your classmates, always keep in touch with the university that you graduated from. Community theater is an excellent place to get started as well. It doesn't matter how big or small the role is. It doesn't matter if it's on the stage or behind the curtain. Get involved with different organizations. Think about TDF.
Can you say that again?
It's a theater fund, TDF. And there's also the National Dance Institute. I used to be a dancer for a couple of different dance companies. I always made sure that I sent those postcards out to different casting directors and such. Mailing could get a little bit expensive back in the day. I almost ran out of spit getting all of those envelopes sealed up. However, I can remember doing that, and then people had a physical card of my information, as well as my face was on one side. So it was my headshot, and then essentially my acting resume on the other side. And you always send a thank you. Thank you for coming, because you want people to be able to remember you. That's the way that these directors are going to remember you in this process. You always want to be thinking of a way for them to remember you out of everyone else. This happened actually at one point. I didn't meet the head director, but I met his assistant and was auditioning for a role at one point. And this person actually signed And afterwards, I asked them if they just wanted to, if they asked me if I wanted to grab coffee. And I just asked the person how I could improve my audition for the next time. And they were very willing to tell me that. So don't be afraid to ask. Sometimes you can even get an acting coach. There's no shame in that. It's really great. You could learn something new. You could get a different perspective. You could get different political perspective. You could get several different types of perspectives, which is the idea that you want, right? Go to class, hire an acting coach, never stop going to workshops, that kind of thing.
And if I may just want to add one thing to what Alexandria just said. For actors, especially who's starting their career, they have an idyllic vision of what they want and how everything magically is going to happen for them and it's going to work out. Know that that's not the case. And Alexandria's point really, I really want to emphasize it. You have to audition. An agent is a good tool, but it's not the end or be all. So it's important for you to be assertive and get out there and do a lot of the work on your own. So thank you for putting that out there, Alexandria.
Great. My next question is for Alexandria. I actually auditioned for Tribes in California, and they asked me to send in a tape with sides attached, which is where you engage with another person to read your lines. I had not done that before. So when I got the ask, I went ahead and recorded myself on my phone. I gave my performance, but I didn't have anybody reading the other lines. It was just myself in the room. And I sent that off to the director, and he was really thrown by the silent responses during my audition tape. So would you recommend that it's important to have someone read lines with you in those sides?
That's a great question. The short answer is yes, you should have someone to read those lines. However, that comes with a caveat. Don't have a family member, a roommate, someone you live with, someone that you can have a good back and forth with, and have them make sure that they're behind the camera. Because it's just not about memorizing the lines. They're also looking about how you are responding to the lines that are being thrown at you. They want to see what you bring, what you exude. If you are stoic, it's obviously not going to go well for you. And if you live alone and don't have someone that can read lines for you, maybe you can video conference with someone, ask someone to maybe read the lines with you that way remotely. But yes, I don't always encourage this, but something that can be a little bit unique and can be done sometimes is video yourself signing the lines. And then once you're done, play it back. So sign the lines that are not your lines, and then record that first and play it back and respond to those lines with the actual lines that you're auditioning for. That way you can have that sort of mock interaction. So it's a creative solution, but it's not one that I recommend. That's if you have no options. And I would be very explicit with who the casting folks are. I will let them know, hey, this is my situation. This is the best that I can do under the circumstances, and send that message as part of my audition, add captions, send a transcript so they know with time code, so they know where I am in the script. So that's another potential approach that you can take. You can be creative on how you can show them what you can bring as an actor.
Great. You mentioned captions. Do you think that it's important that we caption all of our audition videos for casting directors as well as directors?
Absolutely, it is helpful. I usually ask them that if I'm going to sign a script, if anyone in the team knows sign language, and if that's not the case, I ask them if they want a caption. If they say they don't want a caption, it means that they know what the lines are. They know that they can figure it out just by looking at me and my signed audition. But if they say yes, then by all means, I go ahead and make it happen, and I add captions to my audition. But again, in terms of an audition, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of worry that goes with it, there's a lot of things that you have to do. However, be mindful that you have people backing you up. You have people there for you. The casting team is really rooting for you and supporting you. They are your cheerleaders. They want you to succeed as an actor. Everyone, the director, everyone who's part of the casting process, they are looking at folks to support them. And really, communication is key, and be clear about what you're bringing. Especially now in this new COVID world, it's not easy. It's completely different.
Yes, I wanted to make a comment about the captions. I personally caption all of my audition videos. It's a lot easier than having to worry about how it is they're going to perceive me, as well as understand what it is that I'm performing. Most casting and directors are hearing, and I want to make sure that they are involved in that process. And I want to make sure that they are getting an authentic look at what I can do with my language as a part of the acting process. And I always make it a on or off option, so the casting director can watch it both with captions as well as without. Often you're submitting MP4s, which can be a little labor intensive to add captions onto, but I would recommend that you always caption your audition videos.
And if I may add to what Andrew said and Alexandria said, if a casting director asks you for captions, then by all means, have them. But like Andrew just said, just caption everything. Because I don't really know of any other casting directors that actually know ASL. So I think just the answer should just always be automatically yes. Even if they tell you we know the lines, assume that they are not really gonna know the lines and what you're saying that well when they're watching your videos. So I think as a rule of thumb, just assume that they don't and go ahead and caption everything like Andrew just mentioned. It's safer that way.
I have so many more questions. In the interest of time, I'd love to move forward. For Andrew, I've gone to auditions in the past, and I often feel conflicted when I go. Those sitting behind the table that I'm auditioning for don't know sign language. And I have this strong urge to just half-ass my audition and my signed translation, because what's the point? They don't understand what I'm saying anyway. I would be interested in getting your perspective on that.
I get you. I feel you. I get it. I know where you're coming from. In a perfect world for me, if someone is auditioning for a role and there's a deaf actor auditioning in ASL, there should be someone in the audition room who also knows ASL. That would be the perfect world. I don't mean an interpreter. I mean maybe a dazzle or someone else. However, that doesn't happen very often. Maybe even ever. So I know where you're coming from. I understand that frustration. But sometimes just because the people in the room don't know ASL doesn't mean that there's not someone behind the scenes that might be watching you, and they might know what you're doing, especially if you are sending a self-tape audition. You really don't know who's going to be watching. Maybe the casting director actually forwards it off to a dazzle to get some feedback. So I really do encourage people. Again, I really empathize and I get it. I understand the frustration. It's there, it's real, it's valid. However, I do encourage people to go for it and try with the best approach possible and audition with your best self. Because hopefully maybe there will be someone that does know ASL, but
Okay, fine, I'll do better. Did you want to add on to that, Monique?
I love acting. If you love acting, try your damn best. Like Andrew just said, you never know. They might forward it to someone who knows ASL, and they might be like, yeah, this is the person. So if you half-ass your audition, it might bite you in the ass. So never assume.
Yes, just quickly. When I'm going into a room, I'm assuming that the casting directors and team does not know sign language, I still think that there's something that can be read in your performance, regardless of whether they're fluent in sign language. They'll know that you're faking it. That attitude will come across and you won't be chosen for future projects. So it's a missed opportunity. They're having the opportunity to see you there, regardless of whether or not they understand your language. They're still going to get a good sense of who you are when you show up. So it's always important to remember that as well, even though, yes, having someone on the other side of the table that understands sign language would be great. I still think that that shouldn't stop you from going to the audition.
So I myself have been the hearing person in the room. And like I said, in the perfect world that I imagine is having someone who knows ASL in that room with a deaf actor. But I understand those frustrations. But having a person in an audition room that knows ASL, I think that is an accessibility issue. And creative teams have to start thinking about that more and thinking about accessibility.
Great. I have one more question for you, Andrew. I know that when I've gone to auditions in the past, let's say I'm not an appropriate fit for that role. Sometimes that doesn't get communicated. I guess it's more of a general question. For those auditioning, how long should you expect to wait before realizing that you haven't been cast for a role?
That's a good question. And to be honest, I feel like, well, sometimes it depends. If it's a TV audition, you'll know when they're going to start filming. So it might take a while to know when you're going to know whether you got that role or not. But that's the other part of our job as casting directors. There's so many people, so many actors that come to the auditions. Sometimes we know immediately and we let them know. So I would say maybe even check in within a week to see if casting decisions have been made. And at that point, they might still not have an answer, or they might. But for me personally, I think checking in within a week, I think it's good. Don't do it the next day. Please do be patient, but about a week.
My next question is for Andrew Morrell. You just auditioned for the Colorado Shakespeare Festival. Could you talk to us a little bit about what that audition process was like?
Absolutely. I did a self-tape audition, sent it their way. They asked to bring a couple of materials, both series and comedy. I sent it to the casting director. for the festival, and I waited about 3 weeks, and I got a call back. I got new sides about specifically the play that they were gonna do that summer. I learned the lines. I looked into the character. Again, another self-tape audition, sent it their way. Obviously, I captioned it, and then I was told whether I got it or not, and that was essentially the process for that.
How often did you refilm yourself?
I mean, I typically memorize everything and practice everything before I hit record. So oftentimes it doesn't take that many takes for me. Actually, just one take, and then I audition it, and then I caption it. So I rehearse, I practice a lot, rehearse a lot before pressing that record button.
Are there any common mistakes that you think that actors should avoid when going for auditions?
It's a good question. Common mistakes to avoid. Don't try too hard. When you go into an audition room, be yourself. Don't try to sell yourself and be over the top with selling yourself or underselling yourself. You want to make sure that they know who you are when you're walking through that door. That they know that you come with that authentic energy. Make sure that you're wearing the right clothing for that respective audition. Clothing that allows you to connect with that character. Stories that I've heard is that actors dress up like the character. I don't think you should do that unless you get a callback for a specific role, but don't really dress up like the character. Do dress up in a way that helps you connect with the character, but don't come in dressed like the character.
I'm actually glad that you mentioned that, Andrew. In-person auditions versus taped auditions. For in-person auditions, I think that as you're auditioning, you've got to make sure you're coming into the space, the casting space, and be mindful that there are different types of expectations for what they want those roles to look like, based off of how they envision that character. Maybe they see a woman who wears heels and has a full face of makeup and is dressed up as more appropriate for that role. And I get that. Men don't have to do quite as much. They throw on a button down and some nice shoes and they're ready to go. I think that that's something that I've seen over time. I think that it's important that you go in being yourself and make sure that you look similar to your headshot. Because if you show up and you look completely different from the headshot, it's going to take the casting director and team back a little bit. Feel comfortable and make sure you feel really grounded in that audition and that you aren't letting your nerves get the best of you. One of the most common mistakes is to show up for an audition completely unprepared. Walk in the door, not know exactly what you're doing. Value your time and value the time of the creative team who's there for casting. You need to have that mutual respect in the room, and to do so, you need to come prepared.
Thank you for that. My next question is for Monique. Monique, I want to talk about audition process and being a union member versus a non-union member. How would the audition process differ between those who are union members and those who are not?
Sure, absolutely. Non-union auditions are open to anyone. Anyone can show up for them. If you are a member of the union, you'll have dedicated times. Maybe, let's say, showing up rather than showing up at 6 a.m. and waiting in line and then signing up and waiting for your time slot, that type of thing. I know that I have an appointment for an audition at 1 o'clock. So that's one benefit to union auditions, as well as the union has expectations and rules that you have to follow, such as providing interpreting services that you have to request in advance. However, you can do so through the union. Alexandria, help me. What are some other benefits to union auditions?
I think with the union, yes, you can ask for interpreters. Maybe asking for someone who already knows ASL because of your previous experiences there. The fact that you get a specific time slot for yourself. For those who are non-union, like Monique said, those are more open calls to anyone who wants to come. For SAG union members, they have to follow specific rules. And processes and protocols are a little bit different than for non-members. And this is all built in as part of their schedule, the time blocks, the breaks that you are required to get. Non-union members can follow, and I do encourage to follow all of those self-care parts of that are required by the union. However, you can do non-union auditions, but they are less than those that are union audition. And for deaf artists, it's a little bit hard to get your SAC card and be part of the union. So try to be more creative. It's harder for us to find those opportunities that earned us that union membership. I myself am a union actor, and I'm happy to be one. And through their network, I was being able to find more work. Sometimes it comes years later, but still is an opportunity because people remember and you have that ongoing network and collaboration with people in the union.
Great. Alexandria, you touched on the audition process, as well as you were just in a show, a public theater show. And that show was called For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough. And you played a role that's long been held by hearing actors. Was the director looking for a deaf person for that role specifically?
Yes, they were. So I am the woman in purple. And they started with early conversations with the director and the writer.
Could you spell that one more time for us?
So I was talking about the writer of this play and their vision. They really wanted a very diverse cast, and they were open to possibilities, including having a deaf character. And the director wanted to have a deaf character, and they asked the writer, and the writer said, absolutely. So it just worked out great. They didn't have to really go into any sort of back and forth to make it happen. The name of the writer is Notsake Shange. And then I got the call back. I had a dance call back, which was a lot of fun as well. I didn't know the choreography before. I had to learn it on the spot. And they wanted to see what's your attitude and how do you face what they're giving you, how do you learn your movement, how you present yourself. And even if you can't dance, that's all right, but you still present something that might impress them. And I got the job. I was thrilled. I was honored. And when I found out that I was a woman in purple, that was just so neat. Those characters that are written for deaf actors, oftentimes you see a push for more diversity, specifically when the writer intentionally does that. However, if the writer intentionally limits the makeup of their characters, that is a problem, but it's important taking into consideration all the intersectional identities that people bring.
So this is an open question for any of you. How can we in the industry, including myself, make the audition room a more welcoming place for diverse actors? Now, not everybody jump to respond to this at once now. Alexandria?
Well, I didn't answer right away because I think it's quite a complex question. So as you're communicating through the audition process, and if there's someone that knows ASL on the team, I think that is definitely that's something will be crucial. Maybe interpreting services to make sure that you can clearly communicate with everyone in the space, and for them to allow you to see more of who you are. So that's what I would say.
I think that naming that communication is an important part of the process. You're working with casting directors and need to make sure that you have transparent communication with them so that you can see what comes of this experience. It is your own, acting is your own journey. And I say communicate with transparency. Let them know what your needs are as compared to showing up to an audition and surprising them. Maybe they had not intended for a deaf person to be in that role, had not ever thought about that person signing. You're going to have, you wanting to make the area a space that's welcome for diverse actors, which should include deaf and hard of hearing people signing. If they had thought about that from the onset, you would already have ASL and interpreters in place. And so I think that it's often our responsibility to educate those individuals behind the table, making sure that if they're getting interpreting services, that they book time slots for these types of auditions. Just trying to see it from their perspective and constantly providing that education.
And just for myself, as I work behind the scenes, I think it's incredibly important for us in the casting team or in the casting community to learn about other cultures and learn about other communities, and how I'm actually going to advocate about other communities if I don't know about them. So I think it's our responsibility to learn about that and be culturally competent, just like Andrew and Alexandria just mentioned. Communication is key again, but I want to re-emphasize that to all the hearing people out there, communication is an issue of access, and we have to look at it from an access lens. And it's important that that is brought into the space, that accessibility is crucial. And it's just basic human rights. I know a casting director that knows sign language, that's one thing. I know another casting director that is hearing and knows sign language. And that is also great. But again, I think accessibility should be at the front for everyone.
I'm getting a lot of individuals reaching out and asking me where to even find them. And that's a great start. Having resources and having those connections in place. I, of course, am always willing to help. Get in touch with these different agencies, organizations, be them community-led or not, to be able to share this information. Casting directors also have that ability to reach out and ask for help as well. And they need to be intentional in looking for diverse actors and actresses. Don't be afraid to state what your needs are. That's also going to be helpful for you.
So as deaf actors coming into audition rooms, obviously it's quite a unique situation. Andrew, you talked about folks behind the scenes who don't know sign language. Should we bring an interpreter? And how does the interpreter fit in the overall audition process? Should the interpreter say my lines? Should they act while saying my lines? How do we utilize the interpreter in the audition process? Andrew Morrell first.
Yes. So I think it's important to coordinate ahead of time who that interpreter is, get in touch with them if possible ahead of time. I always like to work with interpreters that I know personally, but I would never ask that an interpreter act that role. If I'm going into an audition room, I always emphasize at the beginning that I'm working with interpreting services today and that the voice interpretation is not a reflection of my skills, that it's just intended to be a guide as to where I'm at in the process so they can auditorily follow that. But they should look to me as the actor auditioning and not connect that voice interpretation with my audition. So that's what I've been doing.
I agree with Andrew Morrell, absolutely. So when you're going into an audition, remember that it's your audition, it's your time, it's your space. And I immediately asked folks behind the table about, do you want to see me signed or do you want to hear the interpreter read my lines? So again, communication. I clean my space as I come in. It is my time to show what I have to offer. And then I give them the option. Oftentimes they just said, no need for the interpreter, just go for it, go ahead. Again, communicate when you walk into that space.
Yeah, just to add on to that, it's my responsibility as a casting director and as a part of the creative team to arrange interpreting services. And I should be thinking ahead of time, most especially if I'm looking for a deaf actor to audition. It makes sense to have interpreting services in place because, again, it's an access issue and it's part of my role as someone working with the creative team members. I need to be able to educate them and just say, hey, have you ever worked with interpreting services before? If not, here's the type of thing that you may want to expect. You'll want to address the actor or actress directly, not the interpreter. Just some of those common tips and tricks that make communication a little bit easier.
And if I may, so if you are just starting out, I would encourage you to make friends with people who are also hearing actors or interpreters or people who are becoming interpreters. That way you have the opportunities to work together, rehearse together, practice together. So, and hearing actors also need to rehearse and practice. So that will be a benefit to them as well. So build your own tribe. Have your own team of people that support you. Don't expect deaf characters. If you show up with an interpreter, bring a colleague, a student, if you're starting out, someone with you. Sometimes that's a great way to build up your reputation in the field. That's how I started in my own journey before I became a unionized actor.
Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you have requested an interpreter for an audition, but the response is they don't have the budget or they can't find an interpreter available, or you show up and the interpreter isn't there for whatever reason? What do you do in those instances? What do you do in those situations? Do you go forth with the audition? Do you hold back? What's the best approach in those types of situations? What do you plan for?
I go for it. I still audition. I have my monologue ready with me. I tell them I understand that you don't have an interpreter. Here's my monologue so you can look at the script, and I go ahead and audition, and we either write back and forth to communicate. And I've actually gotten jobs that way. No.
Great. In thinking about this situation, if you were then asked to audition for, let's say, a film or stage role, and they send you a new script, maybe it's just 1 or 2 pages for that character, it's pretty short, but there's very little information about the character themselves. What happened prior to the moment that you're auditioning with or afterwards isn't contained in there. Working off such little information, how do you really extract enough information to be able to give a good performance? We'll start with Andrew.
So whoever is part of that team, you can ask them to give you a little bit more background on that character or more information. Sometimes the casting director themselves might not even realize, oh my God, this actor doesn't know anything about this role. And then they just share it with you. So I think it's important to reach out and ask for a little bit more information about the character. Sometimes you'll get a response, and sometimes you won't. But yeah, hopefully you would get one.
I'm so sorry. The sun seems to be causing some issues with my video camera. What was the question again?
I was talking about sites with very limited information. What would you do?
I think that's part of the life of being an actor. Sometimes you may not know the backstory, but you look at the information and the text that you have and use an analytical process. What is the place setting? What is the timeline? What's the information that you can pull from there? And if you don't have all the answers, then you can invent some of it to help you tell the story more fully. So you could invent, let's say, if the character is a father, is he married? Does he have children? Those types of questions are the things that you can use to help develop that character in your mind and help you fully realize that character, working off of that limited information.
So we are running out of time. However, we do have a few more questions before we wrap up. So specifically during you're auditioning for a role, for a particular character that requires for you to speak, even though it's a deaf character that requires you to speak. There's a lot of controversy around this because for many of us deaf folks, being asked to speak and not knowing whether we speak well or not and going for that role. So for many of us, that is actually a form of trauma. So do you all have any perspectives on receiving auditioning for a role that is a deaf character that is required to use spoken language?
I'd like to shout out a friend of mine, Natasha Oli. Natasha and I got together well over a year ago now, and we're talking about deaf artists and the way that we communicate and the different tools at our disposal. And thinking of it as a tool helped me frame and acknowledge the tools that I have and bring to the table. I do have the ability to use spoken language. Not everyone interprets that as clean spoken English, but if I do get a role where I'm asked to use spoken language, I will do what I feel like best represents that character. But I agree, it doesn't mean that I'm agreeing with the writing or the representation always of that role. It is my hope that getting in on this project or getting cast for those types of roles, I can also help bring some perspective to the table and question a little bit why they would write a deaf character who is speaking spoken language, and maybe help them a little bit with their creative process. If they are hard and fast in their decision for spoken language to happen, it can get sticky. I have said no for various reasons from time to time on roles as well.
I think it's important to always come in front with an open mind, at least for myself. If they want me to use my voice, which is not very melodious, just know. But I do it. I do it. And that's what they want to represent in that character. That is their choice. That is their decision. It's their show, not mine. And sometimes they'll final decision be like, hey, I want you, and they'll go with some, they might be willing to do some changes and be like, hey, you can use spoken language just in this moment of arousal where you're angry. So you don't really know what they're thinking. So it's important for you to come in with an open mind to do your job.
Right. I would just quickly want to dovetail onto what Monique was mentioning. It's important to keep an open mind. I do not use spoken English at all. I do not have clear speech. So when I see auditions like that, if it is appropriate, I always try to keep an open mind to that. I will let people know when I'm going into those auditions that I cannot speak. However, what is it that you have in mind? Why are you doing that? I could bring in a vocal coach to potentially practice those moments. I am an actor who can do this job, and I'm auditioning for this role, so I bring solutions to the table as well. I have not done this experience before. However, I would imagine in that situation, that's what I would ask for.
Thank you so much for that. So if we can shift gears just for a moment here. Let's look at social media, whether Facebook, Twitter, whatever that may be. Does that really in any way, that presence play a huge factor in whether or not you get a role? As we try to blur those lines between potential fame, acting, and also your presence on social media. And they both really go hand in hand. Andrew Fem.
You can see my visceral reaction on my face. I can't hide it. I'm far too expressive. I am noticing a trend. I feel like agents and managers are starting to include that type of social media information when they're sending over potential actors or sending in their actor submission lists. I'm like, why are you including that? For me personally, it doesn't matter. I would much rather see an actor's skills and abilities and what they bring to the table. And including the fact that you have 100,000 followers doesn't mean much to me. However, as a producer, it could be important. Sometimes people are cast for shows based off of who they are, based off their notoriety. It helps. It helps with the production. And unfortunately, that's just a part of the industry. And for me as a casting director, it's less important, but can sometimes be important for certain productions.
I get it, absolutely. Any last burning comments or thoughts that you'll want to add? How many followers do you all have? Andrew Morrell?
In the deaf community, it's very small. And we have a culture of practice, and coming into the entertainment industry is newer for deaf individuals. Utilizing, so am I a social media influence or am I an actor? That's a process that we all have to look at. And when it comes to social media, obviously there's benefit there because you gain visibility. However, that's not always the case, as Andrew Fem just mentioned. Casting directors and producers may not always care how many social media followers you have. And then there are others who are going to prefer people who have a larger following in order to attract more people to the production itself.
Very quick comment here. Sometimes people who have 100,000 followers on social media, many of them actually purchase followers, and I want you to be mindful of that. So it's not always about talent at the end of the day. So just wanted to put that out there.
I do have one final question to ask everyone. In going to an audition, we've all been to many. It's important to go to as many as you can to get your face out there. Often we will face ignorance, people who may just be generally not interested in auditioning a deaf person or casting a deaf person. We will face those types of situations and frustrations, and it can make you angry and resentful. How do you handle those types of emotions when you find yourself in that situation? Monique?
So always see this as a practice opportunity for your pitch, even if they seem uninterested. And file those emotions away for a different job that you might need them. So try to turn those negatives into a positive that are really going to benefit you in the long run.
I think that Andrew Morrell stated it beautifully. Don't take the no's personally. You can be the most prepared person. You can go to every audition, but you cannot forget that this creative team has already seen, by day 2, probably 300 actors come through the room. They are tired. They are overworked. And so they may look bored, or they may look uninterested or hungry or whatever it is. Don't take that personally. And I agree with what Monique said as well. You need to always come in and portray that positive attitude. It is your right to decide whether or not it's a teaching moment when you face those individuals.
And just a quick comment, once you get an audition and you show up, that in itself is incredible. Whether you get it or not, you've shown up to that audition. That's going to have a ripple effect that you don't even realize. Your mere presence, you're educating them, you're showing your talent. So at the end of the day, it can be a huge benefit to everyone.
I went to 2 auditions where I was not offered the role twice over with the same casting director. The following year, I was offered a role by that same individual.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all of our viewers or panelists. Thank you for sharing so many of the resources that you have. And thank you for letting us learn more about the acting industry, the audition process. If you want to know more, just feel free to find the folks here on social media and follow them. Send them a request, a friend request. And after you're accepted, then start a conversation, because you'll be surprised. They'll be more than willing to share anything with you. So thank you to Alexandria, Andrew Pham, Andrew Morrell, and Monique. Thank you so much. And for our viewers, please watch next week. We will be having a special guest.